there's this perception that everyone with autism maybe, wants to find love and they're so charismatic, and because that's what people are seeing. So it's kind of this funny effect that happens, but I think it's a very incomplete and sometimes misrepresented view of what autism is.
See, every day you go to a cafe and you might have a mom with a neurodivergent little child having a full meltdown. And it was nice to see this time around that less people were staring. People were trying to help. They were bringing him a cushion or a little toy so that he could regulate and not.
Welcome to Autism Truth Podcast by Audi Parent. My name is Jen Salvucci and I will be your host. Today's conversation goes beyond awareness. We're exploring how autism is seen in media, in schools, and in everyday life. And more importantly, what needs to change for families to feel truly understood and supported. Joining me are two incredible voices, each shaping the world in very different but equally powerful ways. Please help me welcome Jigna Doshi and Danielle Pretsfelder Demchick. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
So I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about both of you, and then we will start our interview. All right. Jigna, you are an inclusive education leader and founder of Enso International Academy, Toddler TOWN International Preschool, and Ollies Early Intervention Preschool in Malaysia. Jigna is a passionate advocate for inclusive education, dedicated to supporting neurodivergent children and their families across Malaysia. Through her work, she has built nurturing learning environments that focus on understanding, acceptance, and real developmental progress. As a business leader and change maker, she continues to shape the future of early childhood and inclusive education, creating spaces where every child is seen, supported, and given the opportunity to thrive. Danielle Pretsfelder Demchick is a CSA, is an advocate manifesting change in how the real world is reflected in today's media. Her focus is on elevating underrepresented and misrepresented communities. An active member of the New York casting community since 2004, Nickelodeon was her casting home for over 14 years. Since opening her own casting office in 2022, she continues to cast Viacom kids and family content and is thrilled to have recently worked with Netflix, PBS, Disney Junior, and Sony Pictures Television. She is actively casting theater, commercials, podcasts, and film, including the upcoming deaf-led feature film, The Flash Before the Bang. Some of her favorite recent credits include Patrice on Hulu, Together We Can from Sesame Workshop, Well Versed, Nickelodeon, Wonder Pets Into the City on Apple, Pulse on Netflix, and the Inevitable Foundation's Visionary Fellowship for Disabled Creators, sponsored by Netflix. Prior to Nickelodeon, she worked in independent film casting and spent a year at Innovative Artists, learning the agency side of the business. The co-VP of Advocacy for the Casting Society of America, her work elevating underrepresented communities has been barrier breaking. She has led open calls for performers with disability, Manasa, which is Middle Eastern, North African, South Asian, veteran, senior, Native American, Indigenous, trans and non-binary, Black, Asian, and Latina actors. In addition to being on the board of the Casting Society of America and Casting Society Cares, she is pursuing a master's degree in disability studies at the City University of New York. She prides herself on being an ally to artists and aspiring talent of all abilities. Thank you both so much for being here. Your backgrounds, I've read a lot, are truly amazing and inspiring. So I want to get right into it. I'd love to hear from both of you, but what brought you into this space? I want to know as much as you're willing to share. So Danielle.
I grew up with what I say is I kind of had like a siloed existence. I was a kid actor, and it was a very, everybody was pretty much white, able-bodied, and cisgendered around me when I was acting. And then I didn't realize that it was unusual, but my home life was very diverse, both, racially and culturally, as well as I have a cousin of trans experience. I grew up around a lot of disability, both within my family and family friends and people around us. And I didn't see any of that when I was acting or auditioning. And I didn't understand as a, like an 8-year-old, I think you just kind of think like certain things exist here, certain things exist there. But as I decided to get into casting, which I decided at a very young age, I actually decided that at 8. I didn't want to be an actor anymore. I was like, okay, well, when I'm being told by my incredible mentors, the people at that time, it was like when I was at Nickelodeon, like, okay, if you were casting your birthday party, who would be there? Kind of like a challenge. And the idea, I was like, well, and at that point in time, we were, thankfully we were seeing people of color everywhere, not necessarily represented correctly. There was a lot of misrepresentation, but at a birthday party, you would see that. But you weren't seeing disability, and you weren't seeing even at that time, maybe, same-sex couples and all of these different things. But the one place I couldn't recreate my own birthday parties was disability, because there weren't actors with disabilities being submitted. And even when I would go to agents, they would be like, oh, okay, great. Like, you want to see people with disabilities? Like, I can ask, this client's brother if they can come in. They're a wheelchair user. Well, they're going to come in, but they're not a trained actor. They don't have experience. How are they going to stand up against, no pun intended, wheelchair user? But they're going to, act against somebody who has all this experience and has been in those rooms. And like a light bulb went off for me, and like my whole career basically changed then. I had like a moment where I cast a deaf actor in a role that was an ASL speaking role, where I had initially been told to cast a hearing actor that signed, and I was like, that's not right. And I like really, my stubborn self was very stubborn and really held down that was the right thing to do. And we ended up winning an Emmy. So I think like, I got this green light from there within, to do things the right way. We never did things the wrong way, but, I pushed for us to do things the right way, and we did it, and we were successful, and things sort of just snowballed from there. And I was able to kind of find this niche and this place to like really channel my passion and do something important. And I think kids and family media is really where things begin, because and I think it's kind of actually a great segue to Jigna probably, but if you starting in your early life, if what you expect is inclusive environments, inclusive content, that's what you're going to want to see. You're not going to stand for it. You're going to change the channel. And that's what we were doing at Nickelodeon. And that's why I really believe in kids and family media. And that's what I'm doing when I'm working with Disney, anywhere that, I'm working at. We're not just putting disabled kids in disabled roles. We're putting them in every space, because that's who you go to school with. That's who's, serving you at a restaurant. That's who's driving a bus. Like, this is our life. This is the real world. Let's reflect it in media. Like, everyone deserves representation, and people want to see that. Like, it resonates.
100%. Yes. Jigna, what about you? What drew you to create these fabulous schools?
I'd say it was quite by accident, honestly. I've worked in education for more than 25 years, on and off. I went into education after my daughter was born 27 years ago, and I felt like I needed to be at a workspace where I can understand her age group. I'm back home when she's back home, and I'm not working late. Over the years, I opened a few businesses and, ventured out, got out of education, went into different age groups. And about 14 years ago, when I came back into the education sector, I was working with a company where we had this beautiful school. And one day there was this boy who came in that none of us could understand. So awareness was still quite low here. And we all were wondering how we could help him best. And over time, we realized that he was neurodivergent, and his parents didn't know, he didn't get the right support. And that's when we hired an interventionist, we got help. And it just changed the whole game after that. And it was right after that that I opened Toddler Town, and there was no looking back. And it's just like Danielle said, that these are the people all around us. You have to know that they exist, and we created a bit more awareness, and all our schools since then have been inclusive. Children are so used to seeing friends around them who may be different. They're more understanding, they're so supportive. Families have come together. We had a parent-teacher meeting where a parent couldn't make it, and 3 other parents came in for that child and sat in for the meeting. You know, it was beautiful.
That was like, yeah, my daughter, I was just telling Jigna about Charlie. She uses a wheelchair, and she's been with the same kids throughout, so they're used to it. Like, they don't think twice about it.
Yeah.
They'll even go ahead in the line to like open the door in the school. And I just think that that's wonderful, because when I was growing up, anybody that was in a wheelchair or was any sort of difference was like sequestered away in a different area of the school. And so it wasn't part of the world. And that kills me now, just thinking about how it was then and how it is now, thank goodness, for kids. That's what they are. They're kids, right? Everybody's got their strengths. Everybody's got their weaknesses, and do things differently. So it should be inclusive. Let's talk about something simple but honest. When you think about how the world sees autism today, does it feel accurate or does it feel incomplete?
I don't think it doesn't feel accurate or incomplete. I just feel that it feels misunderstood or very limited. And the more we know, I actually realize that we don't know anything, and there's just so much more that is out there that we don't know. It's just like you said, growing up, we didn't know, and children were put aside or not looked at. So yeah, it's very misunderstood. Their capabilities, everything about autism is just still very misunderstood largely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's from like a media perspective, I think it's very incomplete what we see. Like, I know I had shared with you, Jen, the podcast that I listened to that I thought was really interesting, talking just about, what we do see in media in terms of autism. It's very rare to see someone non-speaking. It's very rare to see someone with an AAC. It's very rare to see a woman, let alone a woman of color. Like, there is, a lot of feeding into stereotypes when it comes to autism or casting people with autism. And then even just, like my dorky casting director head, like looking at kind of what something like Love on the Spectrum has done in terms of representation. Like, there's a lot of questions about certain people on that cast, like, oh, they're so pretty, they're so this, how could they be autistic? And it's like, I love that there are Reddit threads about that. Like, I think it's, amazing that people are questioning that, and that there is an awareness now. But the idea that was a question is kind of, that just tells you how this show is changing perceptions and how media does change perceptions, because I think a lot of people don't associate pretty or accomplished or, certain things with autism, and that is not true. But, there are also, there is a reason there's criticisms of any show. And I love the show, but like we're not seeing, people that are non-speaking on TV. We're not seeing AACs. We're not seeing that some people with autism, they aren't able to date. That isn't necessarily that, or that they don't want to find love. It's like, there's this perception that everyone with autism maybe, wants to find love, and they're so charismatic, and because that's what people are seeing. So it's kind of this funny effect that happens, but I think it's a very incomplete and sometimes misrepresented view of what autism is. Because also it's just like anything else. It's different in everybody, how you see it. There's not like I think sometimes people are overly like, having seen it now, diagnosing people, looking at them or thinking that this is what autism looks like. And that is not the case.
I love the show, The Pit. I don't know, Jigna, if it's on in Malaysia or not, but it has two sisters, right? Like just two sisters that have been on many a show has had two sisters. And they happen to have autism, but it isn't about autism. it's literally about two sisters and the storyline of one being more protective of the other one, and that's all it is, like any sibling group. And I really admire them for doing that. It's exactly, Danielle, sort of what you're saying. Like, they can be, at some point, Danielle and I were emailing, and she said something like, I want to bring in people for like the Starbucks worker. Why can't it be somebody in a wheelchair? It shouldn't matter, right? But we're still sort of working to change that, how it's been looked at. And so people, it is misrepresented, but at least it's being talked about, I think, is good. Some of the things that they come up with, I think, like Danielle said, to your point of people with autism can be pretty, like,
I love that about the pit, though. It's so true. Like, that's not the storyline, and like, and it's cast authentically. Like, it's so well done. And I think, I mean, and I mean, that's my casting mentor. That's how I got into casting, is Kathy, the casting director of that, which is just a coincidence. But I'm so like, you know, there's so many things about that show that I think are so incredible that they're doing right. And I think that storyline has been, and I love seeing all of the love that those actors are getting. Like,
Yes.
you know, I think they're people that we never know. Like, I think a few years ago, they would have never had a time in the spotlight, you know, like, but people now are accepting them as like who they are, and are like, wow, these, like, have you seen these girls? Like, people keep asking me, I'm like, actually just got a message. I didn't read it yet, right before we came in, about something related to the pit, about based off me being on this podcast, somebody asking me something. I didn't read the message because I was, again, not, you know, in the mode of doing that, and I was trying to rush to get here. But I thought it was really interesting that, like, it's, you know, that talked about, and I think it's so unique to see a storyline like that. But that's, I mean, that people that are autistic have sisters, and they're one's more protective. Like, that is the real world. It's really cool, though, to see finally a show doing it right.
I love that. Like, and also,
Yeah.
it's great too. Jigna, is it on there or no?
It's
I'm
on
gonna
season
check,
2,
like,
so
today. Oh,
okay, yeah, you
it
should.
be
It's on
there.
season 2, so
Yeah.
hopefully it's on for you all. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I really want you to be able to see. It's also gross. Like, a lot of people don't like it because it's very, like, Danielle was like, no, I can't right before I go to bed. But like, because it takes place in the pit, is like the ER of a hospital in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And so it's very graphic with that stuff. But other than that, I don't mind it. I love the show ER from eons ago. So
Yeah. I love
That's
it.
an example of a show
Romance.
that did a lot of things wrong in terms of disability
Yes.
representation.
Yup.
And but it's really cool to see a show doing things right.
yeah, really right, which I love, like we've been saying. So, Danielle, do you feel, and we've sort of touched on these with everything, but do you feel autism is sometimes simplified into a single type of story rather than showing the full spectrum of real lives?
Yeah, and I think it's really hard from, like, I mean, this might be like a little inside baseball, but in terms of like getting projects greenlit, I think there's often a, like, because people think they know what autism looks like, there's this really incredible project that I cast that has an autistic actor who has apraxia, who's a speller. And I think it's like, what is he? Who is he? What is that? I don't think people, you know, it's such a good script. And the actor I found is, I mean, he's incredible. He's gone on to book a lot of other things that I've found, you know, and sent his way. But getting this movie greenlight's hard because that's not how people see autism. You know, they don't see people with apraxia and people that are spellers, or with, you know, I think people are used to a very stereotypical thing. And I think, but, you know, I think the way representation starts, it's always, you know, we first see that, and then eventually things, you know, we kind of like the floodgates open. At least that's my hope with things like this. And I think, you know, podcasts like this, conversations like this, schools like Jigna started, like, that's how things change, is that people see this real spectrum. And that's where this story came from. Like, this isn't based on a true story. This, you know, movie, someone wrote it. Like, this is, you know, someone met this person kind of a thing in their life, or has seen this, but we don't see that in, like, most media.
No, but I'm hoping that, like, Jigna, with your schools and things like that, because these kids that are in these schools grow up with, everybody's different, right? Like, that's just, they have kids that use talkers, they have kids that are in wheelchairs, you know, whatever it is, people that, you know, different sort of needs. And then they're going to grow up and they're going to be the ones, all of these kids, that are in the movies, that are casting, that are like, you know what I mean? I just feel like it's going to hopefully, knock on wood, become the
Change a
norm.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the acceptance, which is different for like my students, because Jigna, I also work in a pre-K through 8th grade private school. And nowadays, nobody cares, you know, gay or straight, nobody cares, nobody thinks about it. Like, but back again, when I was in high school, it was very different. So I love the fact that my students now, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
so
beautiful.
normalized, right? Yeah. As it should
Exactly.
be.
I think so too. But I mean, seeing something like that, and nobody thinks twice. So I would love for disability to become just whatever, you know, it just is. Um, Danielle, last question for you, and then I'm going to shift to Jigna for a little bit. But what happens in real life when representation is inaccurate? What does that do to individuals and to families?
I mean, it perpetuates stereotypes. And I think it also makes people that are parts of these communities feel that they can't be represented, you know, accurately in media, and it deters them from becoming actors, becoming writers, becoming directors. And I think that also perpetuates more bad representation and stereotypes. So like it's very damaging. And I know sometimes those are not things that people think of initially when they're not casting authentically or they're misrepresenting, but it's like sometimes people will ask me like, oh, why do you help, you know, other casting directors cast authentically? Like, why do you, like, you know, you're doing that for free. Why are you doing this for people? Because like there is real damage that's done. And also on the flip side, the more opportunities these actors get, the better they're going to be when I'm casting something. So for me, it's like the more opportunities and the more people see that this community, even if you don't book the job, that this community is capable, that this community can do things, the further we get in creating, you know, more accurate representation and creating more opportunities. So I think, you know, misrepresentation, it's like, it's really damaging. It's really scary what people are and are not allowed to do when it comes from in terms of disability spaces, like as opposed to race and ethnicity. Thankfully, there are things that, you know, are just not allowed anymore. But when it comes to disability, like there's a reason that people say, you know, if you crip up, you'll win an Oscar. Like there is accuracy, unfortunately, to those sorts of sayings. And like, we still do have a really long way to go. I mean, even when we see projects like The Pit and things that are, you know, thankfully showing accurate representation and creating more opportunities for this community, for every one step forward, I see like 3 steps back.
And we were talking this week about another project that cast an able-bodied person in the role of somebody using a wheelchair, which is not okay. I also had an experience, I want to say like 5 years ago, where an actor who I had had as a student sent me an email, and it was like, you know, please help, with like 57 asterisks. And she had booked a job and was in the makeup chair, and the PA comes over and is like, oh, the wheelchair will be up soon. And she was like, what? And they never told her that the role that she was auditioning for and that she booked was supposed to be somebody with a physical disability. And she was so incredibly uncomfortable that she would be taking a role from somebody that really used a wheelchair. And she didn't know what to do because she didn't want to be blacklisted, because she was, again, booked it and in the chair. We had the same agent, and I told her to email him immediately, and they worked it out. But I was like, how people can do that and look over an entire community who actually has that lived experience is just got me. But again, we are getting more and more stories where they actually are casting authentically, and that's a huge step forward. So Jigna, you work directly with kids and their families every day. When you hear what Danielle is saying, do you see the real life consequences of these perceptions?
I do. I mean, and I also compare it to how it was 20 years ago and 10 years ago and now, and we're taking baby steps forward. But there is still very little awareness. I remember when I was in school, and if, like you said, if someone was different, they would be cast aside. They wouldn't have friends, and life for them in school was real torture. Fast forward to when my children were in school, they were in an inclusive school, and they had friends who were neurodivergent, who made friends. They were included in sports and in the canteen, and they didn't feel so left out. But I think it wasn't enough. Still, teachers didn't understand them as well as they should. They probably weren't trained enough. It's not really their fault either. And so I feel like because the awareness is so low, there's still a lot of problems that we see every day. You go to a cafe and you might have a mom with a neurodivergent little child having a full meltdown, and it was nice to see this time around that less people were staring. People were trying to help. They were bringing him a cushion or a little toy so that he could regulate and not stare down at the mother and tell her that she's being a bad parent. The perceptions are slowly breaking, and thanks to media, honestly, there's so much coming out on shows and in movies that people are just more aware of the people around them, and instead of making a joke or being a bully, they are being helpful.
Good to hear. What are the biggest misunderstandings you see among Malaysian families when they first come to you?
Sometimes they think that their child is broken and that they can be fixed. They have been told by professionals that their child can be repaired, that autism can be fixed. And it takes a lot to tell them that the professional they met is wrong, because you would naturally trust a doctor. You would naturally place your trust in a CP, right? And you would say, yes, what they told me is right, and you can fix my child, and I can put my child in a mainstream school after this, and everything will be fine after 3 years of early intervention. I think that's the biggest thing that we deal with families when they come to us. And while we try to tell them that while this can't be fixed, your child can really do almost everything that you want them to do, that they should be doing, and this really shouldn't be about what you want your child to do, but you should be seeing what your child can do beautifully and how you can support that. Every parent wants their child to go to a mainstream school, to do very well academically, and we try to steer them to the pathway that that's not everything. There is so much more that your child is capable of.
Is it common, I'm just curious, is it common to get neuropsychs and different testing in Malaysia?
Yes, it is.
It is, okay.
It is. Yeah, it's just that the queues are really long. And there are many who, like I said, will say things that remain with parents which are not necessarily true. So you want to make sure that you're seeing the right person and you're led down a good pathway there.
It really does matter. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a doctor that actually I was speaking to the founder of Audi Parent about, and he had said something similar, and I didn't understand that perception because it just didn't make sense to me. So it really does matter, I think, who you come in contact with. And, there are good, fabulous doctors, and there are not so, just like there are in any profession. So it's really important to be connected to ones that will tell you the truth.
And unfortunately, you may go through a few, and, it just places a lot of mistrust after that, because you just don't know what you're doing anymore.
Absolutely. So you must see a lot of parents in the early stages that are, fearful or confusion or things like that. How do you offer support?
See, I do recognize, like, we all are mothers, and I feel, for parenting, there's never been a handbook, or it doesn't come with a degree. I often felt like I was driving through a dark tunnel with the headlights on, hoping that this will take me through, because you're just doing what you know, you're doing what you hear, and you're trying things out. So I think with so much of fear and confusion in parenting, and then you have a neurodivergent child, it is very scary. They do go through a lot of fear, again, that their child will not be repaired, that their child will not go down the typical pathway that all children do. A lot of confusion because you're reading so much, you're seeing different professionals, everyone is telling you something different. At some point, when they do come to us, sometimes very early in the diagnosis, sometimes a bit later, they have a lot of confusion, definitely fear, mistrust. What we do is really simply just lay it all out, recognize what they're feeling, get them to understand why their child is being like this more scientifically than going through what a book is telling you or what an article is telling you, putting it in a real life situation of how a neurotypical child may also react. And it's interesting how once that they have placed that trust in us and they've seen even little baby changes, they're more on board and very, very clear in what they want to do next. But it's just really sad that sometimes a lot of time has been wasted in getting a child, let's say, asking for milk in a particular way, and if you don't do it till then, you can't progress. And we're like, look, your child does not have to speak it. Give him an AAC, let him tell you what he wants through that. A lot of misconceptions again about the AAC. Parents often feel that if I am going to give them this, they're never going to speak, when we have seen more and more children speaking because they have the support of an AAC device.
And there's not just one way to communicate. And I've been reading a lot on the fact now that, like you're saying, that an AAC can actually help get them to the talking point. And I think that it seems like, anyway, from the younger people that I know here, people are more apt to try that now. And I know some people that work at preschools, and it's been really interesting to see how that has evolved. Are there cultural or societal barriers in Malaysia that make the journey itself harder?
I'd say it used to. Probably still there, with Asian parenting and the Asian parenting mindset. Every child has to be good at academics or you're judged by that alone. I was not an academic student. I hated math and science, but I don't think that limits you in everything or anything that you do. So culturally, yes, that does make a difference, which is why parents just want their child to go to a mainstream school. They want their child doing their IGCSEs. And I do ask them, do you want them to sit for that exam at 26 instead of 16? Because that's how long it might take. And your child's going to find it really difficult and hate every step of that way. So getting them to move from academic to a vocational pathway does take a lot of effort.
Danielle, let's talk a little bit more about misconceptions. More directly, what's one stereotype about autism in media that you really want to break?
I mean, I feel like I'm really stuck on this pretty thing. Just having seen this Reddit thread, it really kind of blew my mind. But I think we have started to see less of the savant autism stereotype, which is good, but I would love to see less of the anything extreme. I mean, and that's just with all disability, that you don't have to be, you're not necessarily the biggest loser, you're not necessarily the most social, happy sunshine person. People with autism are just like anybody else, in terms of moods and demeanors and all of these things. I would love to just see some more normal representation. But I'd also love to see some more, less of autism light. I think we see a lot of that. We see a lot of people that it's just oh, they're just a little quirky. And it's that's not what autism is. And sure, that for some people that is what you would see when you meet them, and that's fine and that's okay, but that shouldn't be all that we see, and that shouldn't be all that's I'd love to see more autistic parents. I'd love to see more autistic people having jobs that aren't, the quirky type of weird artist jobs. Like, I'd love to just see more real representation when it comes to autism. But parents is something, and I actually was working on something that we'll see whatever happens with it. But it was from, I was talking to, it was a like an unscripted concept. So it was more of like a docu-series, but I was talking to a therapist who works with autistic parents to see, because we would need a consultant, and I was going to be producing as well as casting, and like she thought it was fascinating because she was like, yeah, you never see that, but like that's my whole life. She's a therapist, and it's true. I mean, autistic people have kids, like it's just like disabled people have kids, and that those are all things that I find really we do not see at all. And again, that is really perpetuating stereotypes that autistic people can't be parents, or they're bad parents, so nobody wants to see them. When you don't see something, it's the idea that it shouldn't be seen, or it's not, it's not pleasing. And that's not true at all. They're not bad parents or neglectful parents, at least not because they're autistic. I mean, they might be bad parents, but that's not related to them being autistic at all. Of course, there are people that might not be able to be a parent or don't want to be a parent, and I think that is more so what media kind of is perpetuating with what we see in terms of, or like who we see. But that's really problematic. That's what I find really, or teachers like that. You see the autistic student, but you don't see the autistic teacher, just like you see the autistic child, but you don't see the autistic parent. Like, there's a lot of confusion there, and also a lot of times where you see autism as like, oh, the parent was old, so that's why the kid is autistic, or there was something wrong with the parent, and that's not true, and that's a horrible thing to be perpetuating as well. So there's a lot of that, and I mean that's something you see a lot with Down syndrome as well, which also like not true at all.
Sure is not. It's so like I'm now thinking, I'm like, you are right. Like never has there, or that I know of, has there been autistic parents in media ever. Yet
I don't remember seeing one either.
yeah, and I don't think I've ever stopped to even think, oh my goodness, why wouldn't there be? Because everybody can be, is everything. And, and half the time, I know for when my daughter was born, half the time people don't know they actually have a brain abnormality. It just didn't show in the obvious ways, like, delayed speech or no speech or things like that. It's one thing I learned going through all of her testing, that oftentimes, if we really knew, much more of the population would technically fall under disabled than we would ever know. It just depends how it manifests in each individual brain. Do you think, Danielle, that the industry is changing because it wants to, or because it's being pushed to?
I think it depends which parts of the industry and who. And, I think it all comes down to like the producer and the showrunner and what they're advocating for and what is important to them. I mean, I think you can look at certain shows and they're doing it because they want to do it, and it's important to. There are clearly certain showrunners that certain things are important to them. Like when I worked on Pulse, they spent years researching the idea of they spent years researching how to make the ER accessible to a wheelchair user. And it was based off a true story. I mean, there are multiple ER doctors that are wheelchair users that have spinal cord injuries, and that's what the story is there. But they spent years researching. They spent years in the ER there was this, like when I started casting, because I am always researching, I started researching, is there really doctors that have spinal cord injuries? I'm sure there are, but like I wanted to make sure I was understanding, the lived experience the best I could. and understand what it would really look like on screen. So I was casting it accurately. I mean, we were casting obviously authentically, but I wanted to know what it would look like what, and, they were in these spaces shaping the sets to accommodate that. They spent years doing this research, and they, had a emergency room doctor who had a spinal cord injury as a consultant on the project. Like, it was, they were a part of the process from the beginning to the end. So I see projects that are doing things like that, and then I see projects that are like not doing things like that, or trying to do everything they can to not do things like that, or are asking why do we have to do it that way, or would it be better if we didn't cast some, and for me, I just share people's access needs and their accommodations. I actually just cast an autistic actor. Actually, literally, like, I guess an hour before we hopped on here, I got an email from the producer saying how great she was. But I didn't tell them she was autistic when we cast her. I told them when she was cast, and she had been offered the job and she had accepted the job, and she told us her access needs. Just like if I had a breastfeeding mother, I would say she has these access needs. And she was great. They said, by the way, we have to, you were right, basically, kind of a thing. And yeah, she was the best actor for the job. I mean, we did auditions, we did callbacks. She was great. There was no reason that this character couldn't be autistic, and it had nothing to do with autism. But, that wasn't a project where we set out to do that. But I told them, trust me, this is the best actor. Let's go for it. And sometimes people are like, no, we don't want to do that, but I think when you set someone up that's autistic, when you set them up for success, they are successful people, generally, just not like everybody isn't, everyone, there are successful people that are this and not this. But when it comes to autism, I think a really big thing, and I also really commend some of the teams that I'm working with, is that we make sure that they, an autistic kid especially, knows what their day is going to look like. They have some, and they come in prepared. But that's not to say that, that is something that's best for everybody. A neurodiverse brain doesn't necessarily as quickly, for some people, I should say, they don't do as well without those details, but everybody does better with those details. Mm-hmm. Just like having a ramp makes the prop people, able to move things more efficiently, and it also means the wheelchair user can be on set. There are accommodations that you make for neurodivergent actors that would be better for everybody. And that's what I'm always trying to, it's not like you're getting a lesser actor here. You're getting somebody who is going to give you, the way. That's why there's so many really good neurodivergent actors, is they see the world in a unique way. And what do we want to see when we're watching something is a unique point of view. That's what makes content interesting. So, sure, you want to give them a schedule the day before. I think that's good for everybody. I think that's better for everybody. That makes everybody feel more prepared, whether that's so you packed your lunch versus your breakfast because you're going to be on set early versus late, whatever it is, these are things that set everybody up for success. And I think that's the biggest thing that slowly people are learning when they work with a neurodivergent actor, and they're wonderful. But is it because the industry wants to change, or is it because more people are advocating for their access needs? Or, it's so hard to know what is causing what, but the best thing to do is to provide these things, because it makes everybody's work better.
Yeah, more prepared. Do you oftentimes, especially for the kids, do you, let's say you get the breakdown for whatever the, child actor, do you send in kids that use wheelchairs just because why not? Right.
Yeah, I always ask out of a safety perspective, I also never want to insert somebody in a space where they're not safe. Right. There's not a wheelchair accessible bathroom. I'm not going to send somebody there. I might say to the producer, hey, why are we shooting somewhere that's not accessible? Guys, I know we already locked this location, but for the next episode, let's not do that. But I don't want to send someone somewhere not safe, but I will send an upper limb difference actor, because they are not going to have any access needs. I am going to send a neurodivergent actor. I am going to send an actor with Down syndrome. I'm not going to ask permission. And And I mean, I know with neurodivergent actors, like there's always the question of disclosure, like should I disclose, should I not? Because it's not something, visible or obvious unless it's like they use an AAC or something where it is an obvious thing, it's not something visual. But, so that's a topic of conversation, and I think it's very case by case. Like I wish I could say yes, everyone should disclose, but that's not the world we live in, and we're not, full of accepting sunshine and rainbows everywhere. But I do think that, I mean, I present the best actor for the job. Just like I said with this situation where they just cast this autistic actor, it wasn't an autistic role, I mean, at all, but that was the best actor. I mean, and we went through hoops. We did auditions, we did callbacks. That's who we cast because that was the best actor, and there was absolutely no reason that they couldn't be there. I mean, there were actually like specific access needs related to the show, and we talked about those, and they weren't things that would be necessarily neurodivergent related, but I'm saying like there would be certain disabilities where it would have been more of a challenge if we had cast somebody, not to say we wouldn't have, but we would have needed to talk about their access needs and how we would have accommodated them, and we would have. But I think the neurodivergent thing kind of like threw them for a loop because they were like, oh, we didn't realize that when we met her. And I was like, yeah, because she's an actor and she acts really well, and that's why we want to cast her, and she doesn't need anything, more than like maybe the schedule or like these little things. That's great. Let's get that to her.
Right. And the schedule, like honestly, everybody, that makes people more prepared. Like, why wouldn't we do that? Like, what?
Yeah, it's good for everyone.
Yeah.
Right?
To know what time I'm gonna go home.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Whether
What's
it's for
expected of the day.
childcare or, right. I mean, there's a gazillion things. And also a celebrity gets all of those things. A
Without
day
us.
player actor doesn't, but like, does the celebrity know what they're having for lunch? Of course, if they want to. Like,
Right.
they don't have to deal with whatever catering. A celebrity, all their allergies, whatever they want. And everybody should be treated with that, very basic level of respect.
100%. Jigna, from the education side, what's the most harmful misconception within school systems that affect children?
I would say that it's the need of many schools where they feel everyone must learn the same way. Everyone needs to sit down for a 40-minute lesson. Everyone should have the perfect handwriting. You can't walk around the classroom if you need to and still be able to listen to your teacher. I once had a student, probably about 18 years ago when I was teaching in primary, and Adam used to just walk around the classroom. He just walked around the classroom, and I didn't know what to do with Adam because I'm like, how do I get this child to sit down? But if I were to ask him a question, he could answer it while he was walking around. So at some point we realized that he needed to feel something, beneath his feet. So we got him a brick, and we put a brick under just near his chair, and he sat for 10 minutes versus 30 seconds, and every week it got better. All he needed was some adjustments to his learning, but I don't think school systems have that in place. They do not train their teachers well enough to recognize this, because Adam used to be called very, very naughty by the rest of his teachers. And so he used to act out even more because he was so misunderstood. And he could not he was a 10, 12-year-old boy. He could not make his teachers understand what his needs were. He didn't know what his needs were. So it was just a bad loop with Adam. And I do remember him very often. And the last I heard, he's a doctor. He's a doctor. I wonder how a doctor's handwriting used to be like in school, if their handwriting is so bad right now. So
That is so great. I think my child wants to be a NICU nurse, and I've been, as Danielle was talking about it, like that's what she wants to do. She's obsessed with babies. And I'm like, why not? Right? Just because she's in a wheelchair doesn't mean she can't be a NICU nurse, right?
Absolutely.
Be a doctor, give me whatever you want.
Yeah.
Do you see, or do you still see labeling limiting children more than supporting them in Malaysia?
Not necessarily, but what I feel is that there's this huge layer in between that's missing, that is understanding the label. It's just like what Danielle said, right? That if someone needs accommodations, it could just be good for everybody. So it's understanding what's needed out of that label. For example, if I told my Pilates instructor that I have issues with my lower back, that label is going to help her to make some variations in my workout. The same way, if a teacher or a school knows that a child learns differently because of this label, why can't they have variations in the teaching? And why does it have to be a one size fits all? Why does everybody need to do it the same way?
Goodness, I'm so sorry. That was my child not paying attention to her to her delivery that she had. You're fine. Okay, so sorry, Jigna. Well, but it does. Things can help everybody, and also I think that goes back to, at least for my students, when somebody has an accommodation, oftentimes it just makes sense for that if they need longer time or whatever it is. Oftentimes, a lot of people need it for varying reasons, and it is, some of my students with autism need that. Some of my students need it because of, different things. And so for them, it feels good when everybody, because they all benefit from that accommodation. So that makes complete sense. What do you think people underestimate the most about children with autism?
I would say their level of intelligence and the way that they think. It is completely beyond our scope of understanding at times. I was walking by a classroom at Toddler Town the other day, and we have this child who was really frustrated. I mean, she is autistic, she is brilliant, she's all of 4 years old, and she was trying to explain to her friend that his tower that he was building is going to topple over, and her friend is not letting her touch the tower. And she said, "You don't understand. Your base should be wider and your top should be narrower. It is going to topple down. You're not listening to me." And her friend does not know what she's talking about. So he went through the whole experience of building the tower and it toppling over. And then he just looked at her in awe. How did you know that? They're so intelligent. And I think even into adulthood, we have an autistic adult who works at our academic neurodivergent school, Enso International Academy. The way he gets children to form a cue before walking out is completely different from how another teacher would do it. But he gets it right each time. He's just able to think so differently, and it's beyond the understanding of so many other teachers around him. It's just brilliant.
It's incredible.
I mean, that doctor story is like,
Right.
I feel like that's so telling. Like, that kid was, the idea like, oh, he's not going anywhere. It's like, come on. I mean,
I had colleagues in that school
such a
who said, "Adam, he can't do anything. He's up to nothing. He's never going to do anything in life." It was so heartbreaking to hear that then, and it's heartbreaking to hear that every time I remember that right now, that, why couldn't we do more for him? I don't know what he went through in his journey after that to become a doctor, but
wow. And then I think this 4-year-old is probably going to be an architect, so there's that as well. All right, Danielle, how important is it to have neurodivergent people behind the camera?
I mean, that's pivotal to the success of, creating opportunities for neurodivergent people, both in front of the camera, but also just throughout media, and also for authentically portraying people that are neurodivergent. I think it also, there's only so much room for people in front of the camera. And I think the idea that there can be jobs that people see that there's a welcome space for them in other parts of the industry is huge. But I think like neurodivergent brains work really well in the entertainment business, and I would love to see more neurodivergent casting. For me, it's like the point of view that you bring, and that's also why there's so many great writers. And I mean, like that there is something to it. I mean, that's like even my brother-in-law is autistic, and he's an incredible writer, and was very late diagnosed autism. And I think it's like his point of view, the way he tells stories is, he's incredible. Like his storytelling is, I mean, he's one of the best writers he's my brother-in-law. I don't know if I'm not related to my sort of am, but like, I think he's one of the best writers. His pieces are some of the best things I've ever read. And when we first were dating, he had written this children's book, and I had so many friends with kids at the time. And I remember giving this book to them. They were like, so many of my friends' kids were like so into this book, because he also just captures a kid's mind in a way that I think a lot of other people can't. And like, his sense memory that like brings him back to childhood. There's so many incredible neurodivergent performers that I've gotten to work with. Also, like a movie that I cast that's based off a true story. I cast the short and the features with Lionsgate, and hopefully we'll get funding and get it all done soon. But it's about a blind and autistic musician who was, incredibly questioned if he could do anything, and he's one of the most incredible musicians. Like, his story is crazy, but he had this one teacher who really believed in him, and the way he can just like perform, it's this unique point of view. It's not like a savant thing. It's this, to me at least, with some people, sure, but like a lot of times within the arts, it's just you see things in a way that you can capture that other people can't. And it might be that it also, you could also just happen to be neurodivergent and really good at it's not necessarily that you have to be a storyteller, but I think that by having people behind the camera, we're also, or in the arts in any way, we're, shaping storytelling to be more authentic. And we are also making rooms more inviting for actors. I think it's really, really important that people are seeing themselves when they're going into casting rooms or they're on set. You should never be the sole person from a certain community telling a story. There's also a lot of, kind of pitfalls to that in terms of being expected to wear a consultant hat as well as an actor hat. Like, there's a lot of, other baggage that comes with that. But there is no reason for us to not be seeing more neurodiversity celebrated on both sides of the camera. And I do see it a lot in voiceover, which is really cool. I mean, to just see how many incredibly successful voice actors are, self-identifying as neurodivergent.
Really great. Actually, I did not know that.
Yeah. Same with casting professionals. There's actually a few neurodivergent voice casting professionals which has been really, but other spaces, much less of that.
I was going to say, any directors?
Voice directors?
Just directors in general.
Try to think if I can think of, there are, I'm just not thinking of any maybe at the very moment. But another really cool example is like Michael Threet. I'm casting Reading Rainbow right now, and just how incredible he's been about his journey to, being late diagnosed, and, how much he hopes that his story can kind of, help other kids and other families. And I think especially with people of color, how, misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed, and, his story is pretty incredible. And he's just such a cool guy, but he's been the whole team has really wanted to make sure that we have a very inclusive set. And so far, every shoot we've had multiple neurodivergent kids, whether that's because, there have been situations where we're casting specifically for neurodivergent kids, but then like another kid I cast, I had no idea he was neurodivergent until I asked for access needs and mom let me know. But like, that's not what the role is or was. And we had another kid who was an AAC user who's autistic and has Down syndrome, who's going to be on the show, which was really cool. So like it's, we're creating these spaces, and the sound person had some questions for me, like, how do I make sure we capture the AAC, or like how does that work? And I'm like, ask me anything, ask mom anything. Like, happens to be like the coolest mom who's just like, yeah, like, I get it. You've never worked with a kid who has an AAC, not because there aren't a gazillion kids with AACs, but because they're not on TV and you're a sound guy on TV. So sure, like you're going to have questions, but there's no, I would much rather someone call me and have a question. I will always help, and I will always be a resource. And I will always make anything accessible for anybody to make sure that like this is a livable field. I want people to be able to do this, and I want people to know that they can pick up a phone and ask a question, and it's not a stupid question. You've never worked with someone who has an AAC, because nobody's casting people with AACs, but like, let's show this kid's AAC. And Michael, I mean, the pictures I saw from set, like, I mean, what a full circle moment, for him to get to be with these kids who, also the kid got to like learn about the Dewey Decimal System. He didn't know anything about it. Like, it's a really cute story, but like, those are, and like that's how you become, a librarian, is because you meet somebody who, it was cool. It was really cool.
That's amazing. And now that sound guy will know how to work with an AAC, and that's huge.
Won't be afraid, or won't, because I think there's also times where someone's like, I don't know what I'm going to tell my sound guy. How are they going to hear this person? It's like, oh, he can be like, I've done that before. You don't need to worry about it. It was great. Let me show you how it works on Reading Rainbow.
It's evolution, like right there. That's so great.
Yeah.
And the fact that Reading Rainbow is coming back.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped.
So in education, Jigna, how does true inclusion, like what does it look like inside a classroom, not just on paper?
I wished you guys could visit the schools, but I love seeing it happen in Toddler TOWN International Preschool, because each classroom is inclusive. And so what we see there is teachers and interventionists working together. They know each child, the interventionists know neurotypical children as well, and what their needs might be, and the other way around. And you see a whole classroom where everyone is learning in their own way with accommodations. The class teacher knows every child who needs accommodations as well. So when she's doing a large circle teaching, and she knows that this child will not be able to write, she gets him to do it on his screen and show it to his friends. We have a child with CP in one of the classrooms, so when it comes to circle time and they're moving around, two of his friends will be pushing his wheelchair around for him, and it just comes so naturally to them because they've seen it from day one. They didn't have to learn how to help their friend, they're just there helping. We once had these two girls who've gone off to primary school now, and they were so protective of their autistic friend, and they would always jump in to help that child. And when a new student came in who didn't know what was going on in the classroom, and he was laughing at the autistic friend, and these two girls went up to him and said, let's sit down and let us tell you about our special friend and why he's special, and let us teach you why you shouldn't be laughing at him. And they did that, and these were 5-year-olds. It was amazing to see them doing something that even adults struggle with. They sat the boy down, they showed him what his needs were of the friend, and from the next day, this new friend who realized that the autistic child did not know how to tie his laces, he was there every day in the morning waiting for him to come to school so he could help him with his laces. And every day at 1 o'clock he's like, oh, it's my turn to do the laces today. And that classrooms, those are so beautiful to see. It's so magical, and I can't wait for these children to become adults to see how they are supporting their co-workers at the workspace, because it's going to be completely different from what we see today.
Those are the change makers. Those are, again, things will just be.
Everybody
has
just
space.
No second thought on, oh, what is this and why is it like this, and it's so exciting that we'll be able to see that in the next 10 years, hopefully, over here.
Yes. And also I oftentimes find that kids, if a kid says it to them, they'll latch on right away versus
Adult,
because it's different when
It
an adult
is.
says something. And because it is the norm to those girls, and they're like, no, that's our friend. What do you do? I love that. And it just broke the cycle right away, which is phenomenal. How do you balance academic growth with emotional and life skills?
We see that the balance probably lies with each individual. Like, we meet some children and even adults, right, who may not have a very big emotional side or need, or a life skill side, but they're totally like in their academics so well, and that's what they're all about. And they probably do well in fields like medicine and with accommodations when they're younger. And then we have this artist in our vocational school, and he has this really big emotional side that he needs people to listen to before he can do beautiful work. Or we have this boy who makes wonderful cookies, and he usually packs them for every event that we have. And so when any of our branches have an event, he's the cookie maker. So he loves singing and he loves music on when he's doing that. So he has that big side of him that needs a lot more emotional support. And I would say, like, we just use their strengths to balance it out in the best possible way for them.
Because everybody has strengths and everybody has challenges. And I love hearing that he's able, like the cookies, like that must be so special for him to know that he is the one people go
He
to.
feels so special.
To prep from.
He even asked a few weeks back, because none of the schools were having events. He's like, why isn't anyone asking me for my cookies? And he had this little sass in him that was so cute to see.
Love that. So how are you preparing? Because I know I was reading about the vocational school for young adults. So how do you prepare the children for independence and for adulthood?
So we go through a whole, I think comes up to almost a 5-year program. So once we've worked on pre-vocational skills, life skills, they're able to take care of their daily needs, and then we move on to, by the time they're about 17, we move on to pre-employment training program, which lasts 2 to 3 years, where they learn a lot of soft skills, a lot of hard skills, everything that they need for what they're interested in. Currently, we're preparing some students to be bakers. They're also going to do internships at a bakery at some point. And for each job that we prepare them for, we have this 3-year program, and then we do a job readiness program where they go in with a coach, with a job coach, to the workplace that we have them doing an internship at. They do that for about 3 months, and if they don't enjoy that anymore after 3 months, we set up different internships until they find a place that they are able to love as their workplace. A job coach stays with them for another 6 months until their supervisors, their co-workers, everybody around them is trained to support this adult in the workplace. And then we slowly let them go and see how they fare. We've got one of the best towel folders at a hotel. He does not take cigarette breaks. He does not take unnecessary breaks. He does not even use his phone, but he just does beautiful towels. He does not like talking to anybody. So he's found that perfect job in that place, and he goes in every single day on time.
There's a job for
There
everybody.
is.
And a lot of people don't like to talk to at least here, the American public. They're like, please put me, But I think that's massive training. That is fantastic. That would be fantastic for anyone going in, I feel like, in this day and age. That is incredible. All right. I want to challenge us a little bit right now. So we talk a lot about inclusion, but are we really inclusive, or are we just improving the narrative on the surface? What do you two think in your respective fields? Talked a little bit about it.
Well, to talk about our schools especially, we currently have 4 neurodivergent teachers working in some of the schools because I felt like nobody's going to do it if we don't do it, or if we don't show them how to do it. We've got a girl with Down syndrome who comes in as a support teacher. She loves dance, so she teaches dance to the students. She packs bags really well, and she will not miss out a thing. So we use those strengths of hers to put her in those lessons. So she packs babies' bags perfectly. She loves setting up the nap room for older kids, and she loves sitting there and ensuring that the children who are supposed to take a nap do take a nap. I spoke about this neurodivergent adult in our academic school, and students somehow listen to him. For some reason, he knows how to get through them. We also had another teacher at the school, but I think because there was too much going on at every time with so many students, she couldn't adapt there. So she now works in our admin department. She is able to find the best prices for everything that we need for the schools, and she places orders that reach every school on time. And so I think slowly we are really being inclusive. I do see it at a hair salon I go to as well. The person who washes everybody's hair, he is autistic and he just loves what he's doing. He'll give you the best head massage that you would have gotten. I do see it coming up a lot more than it was maybe 10 years ago.
What about you, Danielle?
I mean, I think there's so much work to do to say that like we're really inclusive. I think there's still there, even when people are being inclusive, I think there's still like a, kind of like a but, kind of a thing on it. So I think there are individuals who are truly inclusive, and there are people within the industry that are truly inclusive, but I think we have a very far way to go where, if we're not seeing autistic actors for the mom, we're not seeing autistic actors for friend number two, if we're not, then we're not being inclusive. Like we're not. Right. So I can't really, that to me, or we're not hiring autistic, costume designers or, that are identifying as such. Obviously we are, but they are, very much hiding that element of them. So until it's not looked at as like a thing, I don't think we're truly inclusive.
Fair. You just made me think of something, and now it has gone out of my head. I know what it was. When was the role of VP of Advocacy for the CSA? When was that introduced?
I think it was when I think it was I was the first one. So yeah, so I'm trying to remember how long ago that was. Maybe 5 years ago.
And what was the reason, like what went into them making that decision?
I feel like it's very political and I can't talk about it without being, I'm trying to think of a way to say it without it being throwing someone under the bus.
Okay.
I think it was clear that certain people were really wanting to maintain that focus within our organization. And they wanted it to be recognized as an official role within the organization, as opposed to just like a committee or, and I think there's also an accountability that has changed, like after George Floyd, various, things that have happened within underrepresented communities generally, that I think there is, the importance of having accountability to people having conversations about that within organizations. So I think it didn't happen at that exact time. It was a little bit after that. Maybe it's not 5 years, maybe it's like 4. I don't know. I think I was that when I was at Nickelodeon. I don't know my life. I'm like blurring it together. So I guess it's been 5 years, 6 years, something like that. But I think there's something important about having somebody who stays up on these concepts and understands terminology and will go the extra mile. It was like we were at was taking my daughter somewhere, and I was like, oh, the last time I was here was I went to Columbia University for a training. I get to do those sorts of things, and the organization is paying for that because, if it's something that I think is important for our organization to be there when there's other, the WGA is showing people there, PJ, other, guilds within the industry. And I think we have, especially as casting, I mean, we are that front line. And I'm the dorky person that wants to go to Columbia and take a class. I loved it, but that's the kind of stuff that, and having our eye out for those trainings and making sure that we're bringing those experts in all of these different elements of advocacy to our members, because we are the people that are the gatekeepers to making sure we are seeing the real world reflected on screen.
Massive. It's such important work, and I just like you're saying, going to the trainings, being there, actively learning new things and bringing it to your members. That's, every organization should be doing that.
Yeah, so I really commend why that we are doing it.
Yeah, it's huge. Jigna, I think you talked a little bit about Adam. Are there any other specific children that you remember that make you think of why this work matters?
Yeah, there's this other child. He came to us when he was 4, and it was just after COVID. And he had speech delay, and we spoke to his parents a few times. He actually was non-speaking at that point, and we told Dad that, let us get him the AAC. It will really help him. And his dad is like, no, my mother is a teacher, and she told me I spoke really late in life, so it's okay. My son will speak too, and I'm not giving him a device. And I said, yeah, but 25, 30 years ago, they probably didn't have an AAC device that could help you. You have it now. Why would you want your son to go through the same difficulties that you did when you can make it easier? So after a lot of resistance, Dad finally agreed, and Dad was like, no, he's not going to speak. I don't think he'll ever speak. It's okay. We'll just, figure it out. But with the AAC device, about 4 months later, with OT as well that we prescribed, the child started having words. And I just heard from Dad, because they moved back to the UK. I just heard from Dad a couple of months back that, the boy is in school, he cannot stop talking, and he still gets support. He needs additional support in class, but he cannot stop speaking. And he sent me this video of him, and I'm like, oh my God, if only we could reach out to every single parent there. Sometimes, very, very sadly, a parent often ends up standing in the way. We have this girl who is so particular about how the bag cubby shelf is in the vocational school. She goes in there 3 times a day just to ensure everyone's bags are lined up correctly. And we're looking for a job for her, and we think she would be an amazing shelf stacker in the supermarket. But Mom is like, no, my child is not going to stack shelves. We're not going to let her do that. So a year down the road, we're still looking for the right job that Mom would be happy with as well.
I know that for me, we have students in my school who, one child is autistic, had a neuropsych done, and the parent won't release it to the teachers. And so it inhibits the teachers from accessing such important information that's going to tell them exactly how to, work with this child in a way that's going to reach him. And to me, as a parent of a child on an IEP who needs services, I'm like, I can't imagine standing in the way of getting my daughter access to, whether it be, medical or therapeutic or education, just massive
things in her life like that. I just don't understand that. And everybody, of course, is different. And so to me, if somebody said, hey, she would be great at this, like to me, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
Like, let's try it, you know, but it's hard because a lot of parents have preconceived notions of what their child is going to be. And when it doesn't go that way, you know, they can't let go and accept who their child is. And, you know, that's really
Very,
tough to
very
see as an
sad.
educator.
Yes.
That's, so, changing how the world sees autism isn't just about awareness, it's about truth and representation and real support in every space that shapes a life. Thank you both for all the work that you do and for sharing your thoughts with us. Like, from an education standpoint, from a media standpoint, I think what you all have shared tonight, it can be life-changing. Like, for movies, for Hollywood to accept that it doesn't matter, you know, what somebody has or doesn't have, or what, who cares? If they're a good actor in this case, like, right, doesn't it make sense that they audition and hopefully book the role? And as an educator, like starting from such a young age and reading about all the schools, Jigna, is just incredible what you're doing and what you're giving to these children and inspiring them and everyone around them. So thank you both so much for being here. Is there anything else that either of you would like to share?
I mean, I think what you're doing, Jigna, with the neurotypical kids is what is going to shape the world in like the most, like, I think that's the underrated, impactful element of what you're doing. Like, I think that is so important, and that is also, you know, important to me in terms of what I do, but I think you're doing it in a much more direct way. But I think, you know, you're changing perceptions before they can even be
Made. Yeah.
perceived. You know, I don't, like, it's a really cool concept, and these are the people that are going to hire, you know, people that are neurodivergent because they see what they're capable of. They're not looking for these, you know, elements of what's wrong with them. And I think that's what, you know, that's like a really weird mindset that we've kind of given people to have. And there's a lot of like correction that, you know, we're all doing to make sure that's not the case. But I think it's so cool that these kids are coming to be in a world where that's not what is being put on them.
Thank you. I have a brilliant student who loves to sing and act. I will connect her with you one
Great.
day.
I love
She doesn't
it.
need a script. She was our MC at our concert last year, a 2.5-hour concert where she didn't need a script.
Wow.
And if she messed up,
That's
no
amazing.
one realized because she just knew how to go around it.
She improved it. Born performer right there, sounds
I
like.
mean, it's an innate thing. And yeah, I was talking to this parent, actually, to the child I was saying who just booked Reading Rainbow, who's has Down syndrome and is autistic. And I was just like, how did you end up doing this? Because he's been auditioning for me for like 9 years now or something crazy like that, since he was really, really little. And I think she said like someone needed a kid for like a you know, a local ad or something. And he booked it and he loved it. And it was like he found a place, you know, and this is a kid who, you know, there's not a lot of places that are, you know, like, come sign your, you know, child with Down syndrome who's autistic up for this particular program. And like he, you know, ended up booking and finding this success in this space, and he's, you know, thriving. And it's just really, it's cool to hear that like the industry kind of found him and he has really found a place. And as, you know, and then I was also talking to this mom, I'm like, from a neurodivergent perspective, like, you know, the industry, it's like being under lights and the noise, like it's so overstimulating for someone who's neurotypical. Like the idea that a neurodivergent kid is like gravitating towards the space, and, you know, and also like that it is hard for him. Like there are parts of this that are hard, but he loves it and he pushes through. Because he wants to be there. Like they don't care. They're not, this is not what the parents do, or this is not their world at all. But it was interesting to just hear how like he feels there's a safety to him of being, you know, in this space.
I did when I worked Jigna. I did this movie, I think like 2.5 years ago, and I wanted to do it because I found out it was a nonverbal, non-mobile like character. That the character's name was Violet, and that's how it was written. And when I found out it was actually going to be played by a nonverbal, non-mobile young woman, Melissa, I was so excited. And I was staying. I always tell the story like we were in the glaring sunlight, and she has an AAC. And she's trying to do the eye gaze, and it's not working because the glare is on the screen. And in the scene, she's supposed to be like happy and bubbly, and she was so annoyed that it wasn't working. And like the other actor and I could, improv around it, whatever. We did what we had to do, but it was so humbling as an actor because Mel had to remain happy and bubbly, even though she was so annoyed. And it made me realize it's like my voice is, I can use it, I can turn it off, I can do, but for her, that AAC is her voice, and it wasn't working, and she didn't have control over that, but she was just phenomenal in it, and we had such a good time working together. And when I asked the director, I was like, Christina, like, what made you write this piece? And she was like, oh, I met Mel on like an educational video shoot, and she mentioned that she wanted to be an actor, and I had that in my mind, and she ended up writing a script based around Mel, and it was just amazing. So I love stories like that. Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you both so much. I so appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you. It was lovely.
Thank you for having us.